If you have yet to play a campaign game of Zombicide, then I think you're missing out on a whole new set of mechanics and game features that elevate Zombicide to a whole new game. Fort Hendrix, RioZ, Washington ZC, and the upcoming PariZ. These are all campaign expansions for the Zombicide Modern 2nd Edition, but which one to buy? Join me today as I delve into the new mechanics in each expansion and help you decide. I'm James, you're watching Tabletop Dungeon. First up though, what's so special about campaign expansions for Zombicide? Anyway, there's already so much extra content for Zombicide, whether that's fan-made missions, character packs, why even bother with a specific campaign expansion? So while the base game of Zombicide gives you 10 missions that are loosely connected in a story, they're also somewhat disparate, and your characters reset completely each mission, carrying nothing through. In the campaign expansions, your game becomes more of an RPG, with character progression, unique skills, and even weapons that can be kept between missions if you're lucky. And you'll also find unique mechanics in each expansion, as well as a compelling set of story objectives. So let's start with commonalities between all of the campaign expansions, no matter which one you buy. You're going to find these things. So first and foremost is the campaign character sheets. These are exactly the same for each expansion. So each mission that you complete, you're going to earn some campaign points depending on how well or how high you got on the adrenaline track. So 1 point for orange or 2 for ultra red. And every so often you can gain new character skills or optionally a one-time use extra action for each mission. A surge of power, if you will. However, your adrenaline and basic skills do reset as per normal each mission. It's only the things marked on the character sheet, these special one-off skills, that get kept. Otherwise, you'd be playing sort of overpowered or playing at super difficulty each mission, which wouldn't be fun. But you'll also use this sheet to track achievements, which leads me to my next point. In the base game, you chase after generic coloured objective tokens, which are supposed to represent whatever. But in the campaign expansion, these are all replaced by narrative cards, which give you an event and possibly a choice or just consequences. These can then lead on to achievements should you act in a certain way, which then in turn affect later missions. If you have this achievement, do this, that sort of thing. You'll also find an all-out weapon deck. This replaces your basic weapon, your basic item deck, though individual components vary by campaign. But the new weapon sets all share the ability to go all out. And this is a risky attack, which provides extra dice, but if you roll a critical fail on those additional dice, that is a 1, then your weapon breaks. And this also happens at the end of the mission, so rather than discarding all your items and resetting, anything with a lock icon and a number may be kept, but only after rolling that many all-out dice. And if you roll a break, you lose it. So obviously, better weapons, more dice, more chances there are to break. So you could get really unlucky, or you might end up taking all of your brilliant weapons through to the next mission, which is quite a bonus. The last common point is that if you lose a character, if they die, they're not actually considered dead. You still have 1 round in which to pick them up and carry them out of the mission. So then they'll be able to keep going next time with their acquired skills and such, everything they've built up on their character sheet so far, though they do drop their weapons. So it's not necessarily game over when you lose someone this time around. They will be able to keep going. All right, moving on to the differences between the campaign expansions then, and which one I think is best. So let's start with Fort Hendrix. So Fort Hendrix introduces a day-night cycle mechanic, with line of sight for both you and the zombies limited when you get to the darkness, and it's much harder to shoot, similar to how it is indoors in dark rooms. However, it also adds equipment like a flashlight, which removes penalties, but if it's still on the board by the time the zombies activate, they can all see you and they get a free action, having been enraged by the brightness. So as the name suggests, Fort Hendrix brings a military element to the game, with a separate additional item deck full of powerful military equipment such as night vision goggles and incendiary grenades, which you can only obtain from certain military buildings. Fort Hendrix also brings a new zombie type, soldier zombies, which, while rare, there's only 6 in the box, are absolutely brutal with unlimited range and automatic hits. Never ever let them stay alive or stay within line of sight of you. You can very quickly lose to these things, to the point that some actually call them broken or too difficult. In terms of game tiles, you'll find military-themed interiors and a crashed helicopter, while on the character side it's probably the most interesting expansions, with of course some soldier characters. Also, I will just note that the storyline in this is my favourite storyline out of all the current expansions. Obviously I'm not going to give anything away, but just purely anecdotally, it was the one that I enjoyed the most. So next up we have Washington ZC. Also featuring a new additional equipment deck full of Secret Service equipment and the same day-night cycle mechanics as Fort Hendrix. Washington ZC takes you inside the White House with some complex interiors and staircases that can spawn zombies. Some grassy exteriors with sandbag defenses and a tank. Other than that, there are no new zombie types. And to be brutally honest, I didn't find the story particularly compelling either. Of all the 3 options, I would rate this as the one you could easily skip. Lastly, set in the Carnival of Rio de Janeiro, RioZ doesn't have either the day-night cycle or an additional equipment deck. However, it does introduce the wound deck, which players draw from when they get wounded to provide negative consequences or potential bonus XP after being hit. It adds Brazilian-themed tile sets with stadium grounds and densely packed favelas, which feature walls you can break and tight corridors through which only one survivor can fit at any time, and you may potentially be pulled through by zombies if you end your turn next to them. It also introduces surprise spawns in the equipment deck, and I don't mean the usual cards. Instead, nearly all items will have a surprise spawn icon on them, and that adds 1 walker at every surprise spawn location on the map every time you draw an item with those on it. The characters are a varied bunch of tourists and natives. They're a little bit quirky, and on top of that you get 6 unique zombie models. However, these aren't a new type of zombie, they're just model variations for you to add to your collection and paint. Now, of all the expansions, this is probably the most difficult, I think. I have yet to complete it with my group after a few attempts. We've only managed to get halfway through at best so far. Lastly, and I'll stress that this isn't available at the time of writing, but it was announced at the CMON Expo and is available for pre-order from some dodgier locations, despite completely lacking in any details. However, I did manage to find a description blurb from somewhere, so I'll read that. Unpredictable threats. Tree tokens unleash surprise zombie spawns, while the guillotine adds a unique strategic twist to your defense. So I would interpret that as both having the surprise spawn mechanic from RioZ and some sort of trap mechanism, perhaps. The word defense seems a bit out of place here, so perhaps it'll be a tower defense style campaign or missions. It also says, explore the depths, navigate through ever-changing catacomb tiles, creating a unique dungeon crawling experience in each playthrough, so underground tiles, I guess. And then unique content. Discover all new Parisian themed weapons, new survivors, and innovative zombie mechanics for a thrilling gaming experience. Perhaps you get a stale baguette to wallop zombies with, but I suspect the new mechanisms will be similar to RioZ, with sort of slight rule changes for certain tiles, perhaps. It goes on. Search for a cure. Encounter a mysterious character that holds the key to uncovering the zombie outbreak, and perhaps a solution to stop it. I don't really think they're breaking any new ground there. Probably just you need to accompany an NPC, keep them safe, same as with most of the other campaigns, let's face it. However, I wouldn't expect this to be a Kickstarter as it's already listed on retail. It'd be going straight there, as CMON does sometimes. So that's your selection when it comes to campaigns. For my money, if I was to buy just one, it would be Fort Hendrix, because it has a brilliant new weapon deck. The day-night mechanics are superb, if brutally difficult. The shooter zombies are a real challenge, and I just love the story. But if I was to buy two, it would be that and RioZ. However, I will reserve judgment of PariZ until I get my hands on it, obviously. That said, don't buy RioZ just for the wound deck. Since it's a new deck entirely, I feel like it's something you could print your own custom version of. It's not particularly special, so I wouldn't buy it just for that. But of all the myriad expansions for Zombicide, I will say that the campaign expansions really change the core game, the way you play, and make it into the game I think it always should have been. I can't actually imagine playing a non-campaign version of the game now. The idea of having generic red crates as objectives just doesn't appeal. I want some hidden story, some dramatic twists and turns, some mission objectives that change as the game go on. And that's what all of these campaigns add. So I would highly recommend, well, any of them actually, but if I could only get one, it would be Fort Hendrix. And remember, of course, you can combine elements. So if you want to play with the day-night cycle in RioZ, you absolutely can. I'm doing that at the moment. If you want to bring the wound deck from RioZ to Fort Hendrix, you can do that too. You can add it into anything, really. Or if you wanted to play a basic game of Zombicide, but with a wound deck, a day-night cycle, with Secret Service equipment, and shooter zombies, have at it. Anyway, head on down to the comments with any feedback or suggestions or questions. Otherwise, I'm James, you've been watching Tabletop Dungeon, and I'll see you in the next one.